Rob, as smart as he was very naive in many areas.
It's the kind of thing that usually gets traded like a priceless secret, something meant to guard reputations, legacies, and billion-dollar images. But the silence around Albert Brooks wasn't about strategy this time. That kind of silence doesn't come from lawyers or PR handlers. It comes from heartbreak, the kind that buries itself deep inside your chest until it feels hard to even breathe. What makes this moment sting even more is the history behind it. This wasn't a casual Hollywood connection or some surface-level friendship built on fame. Albert Brooks and Rob Reiner go back more than 6 decades, long before fame, awards, or flashing cameras. Before All in the Family, before Taxi Driver, before Rob Reiner became the filmmaker everyone credits with defining an entire era of American cinema. Back then, they were just 2 young dreamers cracking jokes and chasing laughs, not realizing how heavy the future would become. That bond, that shared history, it wasn't built on red carpets. It was built on loyalty, laughter, and time. So when Albert finally broke his silence and spoke about what really happened inside that Brentwood home, people stopped and listened. And what he said wasn't rehearsed or approved by any PR team. It came straight from the heart, unfiltered, emotional, and overflowing with truth. You could hear the frustration, the guilt, the disbelief all tangled together like a storm. And the moment he spoke, the story flipped completely. Most people just skim headlines, see words like tragedy or arrest.
The fact that I'm here makes my heart break, that we have to do this because of the reason. But by the same token, I love talking about them because it's genuine and it's rare. And so I just wish there was no reason to do this.
And scroll past without thinking twice. But this time was different. It demanded attention. Because Albert wasn't just mourning a lifelong friend. He was exposing something deeper. A breakdown that had been quietly rotting behind the scenes for years. He was saying out loud what powerful people only whisper behind closed doors. And that's exactly why everyone's still talking. The media's version of events has been laser-focused on Nick. Every headline, every interview has painted Rob and Michelle as these flawless, devoted parents who sacrificed everything to help their troubled son. And sure, no one's denying the love they had, but Albert's perspective hits completely different. It's heavier, rawer, and brutally honest in a way most people aren't ready for. Albert isn't speaking as an outsider or a gossip source. He's speaking as someone who was there, someone who sat in that same living room years before everything fell apart. He saw the tension building, the warning signs flashing, while others stayed quiet out of fear of crossing some invisible Hollywood line. He says it felt like watching a slow-motion crash that everyone pretended not to see.
This is where we met, but of course, there's nothing left of it, just like our friendship.
Yeah.
We sat on that bench.
We did?
He's not blaming Rob for loving his son. That's not what this is about. What Albert's trying to say is something deeper, that love without limits can turn into something dangerous. When affection becomes denial, when it ignores reality just to keep the peace, it doesn't protect anymore. It enables, and that's the word Albert kept repeating. Enabling. Instead of running to the spotlight or sitting down with a late-night host, Albert chose to share his truth privately with a small circle of old friends, industry veterans who knew Rob long before fame changed his world. And now, pieces of that private talk are leaking out, and what they reveal is shockingly real. Albert didn't speak in vague hints or half-stories. He described one night in particular, about 8 months before everything finally imploded. It was meant to be a calm evening. Just Rob, Michelle, Albert, and a few close friends around the dinner table. Good food, old memories, no drama expected. Then, suddenly, Nick showed up. No warning, no call ahead. And if you've ever dealt with family tension, you know that instant shift in the room, how laughter fades, eyes dart around, and no one wants to be the first to speak. But Albert says Rob's reaction wasn't anger or fear. It was something far sadder. Hope. Pure, painful hope. Like maybe this time would be different. Maybe his son had finally turned a corner. Albert paused describing it, and even people listening to him years later could feel it. Because hope like that can be beautiful, but it can also break you when reality keeps proving you wrong. Albert made one thing crystal clear. He never said Nick was beyond help, and he never called Rob a failed father. What he said was even harder to swallow.
This is the first time both of us have been back since
Right.
we graduated.
Over a certain age, it's against the law.
Only for you, though.
Well, life works best when you remember. You remember, nobody bothers you, that's the way it was, I looked great. When you have to confront the actual people you were with, oh my God, who are you?
Pretending a storm isn't coming doesn't stop the rain from falling, and that's what made his words hit so deep. Because this story isn't just about one famous family in Brentwood, it's about a culture that values image over intervention, perfection over truth, a system where silence gets rewarded and honesty gets punished. Albert didn't sound angry. He sounded drained, like a man carrying years of regret for staying quiet when it mattered most. And that's what sticks with you once you hear it. You can't unhear it. He said Rob stood up the second Nick walked in. Open arms, a soft smile, trying to make everything feel normal again. But Nick wasn't there to reconnect or make peace. He came with a demand. And it wasn't small change either. We're talking serious money, the kind of money that gets used to cover cracks instead of fixing what's broken. Albert says the energy in that room changed in a heartbeat. Voices went silent. Forks stopped moving. Everyone froze. And then there was Michelle. Albert says the moment he looked at Michelle's face, it wasn't frustration he saw. It was fear. Real, shaking fear. And that detail matters more than people realize because that fear didn't suddenly appear that night. It had been living in that house for years, quietly, like a shadow no one wanted to acknowledge. Albert admits that after seeing that look, something inside him snapped. He couldn't stay silent anymore. He pulled Rob aside, away from the table, out onto the patio, where the rest of the group couldn't hear. There were no soft words, no sugarcoating. He looked his oldest friend right in the eyes and asked, "How long are you gonna let him hold you hostage?" That question still haunts him to this day. Rob didn't yell. He didn't defend Nick. He just looked tired, completely drained, like a man who had carried too much for too long. And then Rob said something Albert says he'll never forget. "If I stop, he ends himself." That line broke Albert. Rob truly believed his money, his presence, his attention were the only things keeping his son from falling apart. In Rob's mind, pulling back meant losing him forever. What Rob didn't see, Albert says, was that by constantly protecting Nick from every consequence, he was slowly bringing that same danger straight into his home. And that's where Albert's view makes people deeply uncomfortable.
Rob, as smart as he was very naive in many areas. Rob had trouble with women, Rob was shy, and then Rob, on the film, met the love of his life. I was always told that when he met Michelle on that movie, the ending changed.
Because he refuses to let mental health become an all-purpose excuse. He's not dismissing it, but he's also not pretending it explains everything. These days, every situation gets turned into an understanding tour. People point to trauma, addiction, pressure, or upbringing. And sure, Nick had real struggles. His issues with substances weren't a secret to anyone. But Albert doesn't hide behind that. He's brutally honest. He says he grew up surrounded by addiction. He saw people at rock bottom, and most of them didn't cross certain lines. He insists this wasn't just about mental struggles. He says something deeper was brewing. Resentment, the kind that builds slowly and poisons everything it touches. Albert believes there was deep anger there. Not just frustration, but a bitter rage directed at the very people who loved him most. And he says the mainstream stories keep skipping one key emotion: jealousy. Imagine growing up under the massive shadow of Rob Reiner. Every move compared to a legend. The man behind The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me. There's no room to just be yourself when your last name is a brand. Albert remembers one moment years ago on a film set. Someone casually mentioned Rob's name, and Nick's reaction was instant. Not a joke, not lighthearted annoyance, but pure fury. Albert says that wasn't rebellion. That was something far more dangerous. The kind of bitterness that grows when someone feels invisible next to greatness. From Albert's view, Nick didn't just want money. He wanted to break the myth. To tear down the image, the legacy, the pedestal. This wasn't chaos that happened by accident. Albert believes it was planned, a dark attempt to destroy the symbol that had haunted Nick his entire life. And now, Albert's anger has shifted toward what's coming next, the legal battle. The defense attorney, Alan Jackson, is sharp and experienced. Albert says he knows exactly what angle they'll take.
My father died when I was young, 11 and a half, and I met Rob Reiner in my freshman year at high school, and I became really close with his father, Carl. And Rob had issues because it was his father. That communication was not going well, but Carl could dump all of what he wanted to say on me, and I never got so much encouragement. I mean, first of all, I was like 16, and I would go there, and I would make him and Mel Brooks and Norman Lear and Neil Simon laugh till they almost fell off the couch.
A struggling young man failed by the system, overwhelmed by pressure, crushed by expectations. And that's what terrifies him, because he thinks it might actually work. He's been warning anyone who'll listen not to let the story flip, because the next move is obvious. Make Rob the problem. Say he pushed too hard or didn't push enough. Say the Reiner name itself became a curse. Say the parents somehow brought it on themselves. Albert calls that the cruelest twist of all, because the ones who are gone can't defend their choices, can't speak, can't fight back. That's why he's talking now. Not for fame, not for attention, but to make sure the truth doesn't get rewritten by those who benefit from silence. Albert says he's speaking now because Rob can't, and someone has to. If he stays quiet, the story gets rewritten by people who were never there, and Albert refuses to let that happen. He's not just a witness to the love inside that home. He's also a witness to the quiet pain Rob carried for years, the kind nobody wanted to talk about. That's what's making people uneasy now, because this wasn't just chaos or confusion. According to Albert, some moments went far beyond that, crossing into real emotional harm. And through it all, Rob just kept absorbing it, never pushing back. One story Albert shared left the entire room frozen. It wasn't about fame or film sets. It was about Michelle Reiner, the heart of the family. Michelle was the calm in every storm, the artist, the photographer, the one who always tried to hold everyone together when things got tense. Albert struggled to even get the words out when he talked about her. He said that just weeks before everything ended, Michelle called him out of nowhere. She didn't spell things out directly, didn't say Nick's name, but the fear in her voice said enough. She asked him about home security, about safe rooms, about protection. Think about that. This wasn't a woman living in a dangerous neighborhood. This was Brentwood, gated, guarded, the kind of place where people feel untouchable. Michelle wasn't scared of strangers or random threats. She was scared of someone who already had access, someone who knew the codes, someone who could walk in anytime. No questions asked. Albert told her to change everything immediately. New codes, new locks, new system, whatever it took. He begged her to bring in professional protection to put distance between fear and danger. And now, he says what eats him alive is not knowing whether she ever did. He keeps replaying that call over and over, wondering if he should have gone there himself, if he should have stood guard outside that house.
When they did 2,000-Year-Old Man, my father and Mel, it became the hippest thing to be Jewish. When I was 16 years old, I'd come home from school and put on the album, the 2001, and I listened to it every day. I listened to it for months on end. I mean, it was like, it was like going to church. It was like a religion, you know? I mean, it was absolutely, and when I was 16 and I wrote a joke for them, and I told them this joke, and they used it, and I can't believe, I mean, to me, it was like the biggest thrill of my life. It was the derivation of applause.
That guilt hasn't left him. You can hear it every time he speaks. The truth is, Albert and Rob weren't just friends. They were almost mirrors of each other, two halves of the same spirit. They built their careers side by side, their timing, humor, instincts all in sync. Losing Rob didn't just mean losing a friend. It was like losing a part of himself. That grief has hardened into something sharper now. Anger with purpose. Albert isn't attacking for fame. He's stripping away the glossy Hollywood cover-up that usually shields powerful families. Normally, when a celebrity's child spirals, the PR machine rolls out. You get polished statements, privacy pleas, quiet rehab trips, and the story fades away. But Albert says that silence is exactly what let this situation rot from the inside. He believes if someone, anyone, had stepped in years earlier, everything might have gone differently. He even described an earlier moment that still haunts him. He says there was an incident where Nick threw a chair through a window, a violent outburst that should have set off alarms everywhere, but no one called the police. No one made it official. Why? Because, as Albert puts it, you don't call the cops on Rob Reiner's son. Instead, you call a private doctor, a handler, a fixer, someone who cleans up the mess quietly so it doesn't reach the headlines. That's Albert's point. privilege didn't protect this family, it trapped them. Every time consequences were dodged, the line blurred a little more. There was always someone smoothing things over, always a check to make it go away. Until one day, it couldn't be fixed. Albert says the system failed because it bent too easily for fame. And that flexibility came with a brutal cost. People who've seen recent clips of Albert say he looks like a different person. Older, heavier, weighed down by shock. The sharp wit he was famous for feels buried under grief. He described the moment he found out. And it wasn't from the family. It came through a business contact who overheard it on a police scanner. Imagine that, learning your closest friend's gone from radio chatter before anyone even calls you. Albert says he jumped in his car and drove straight to Brentwood. When he arrived, he saw the flashing lights, the barricades, the chaos, and he tried to push through, yelling that he was family. But none of it mattered. The world he knew had already changed forever. The officers didn't recognize him, or maybe they just didn't care. To them, he was just another older man yelling outside a taped-off scene. But to Albert, that moment cut deep. Standing behind that line, watching the people he loved being treated like case files, that image is burned into his memory forever. Now, with the trial set for January, Albert's made his position clear. He's going to be there, front and center, sitting right behind the prosecution. He wants Nick to see him, to look him straight in the eyes. Albert remembers every promise, every excuse, every check that got written to make problems disappear. He's the living proof of what really went on behind those perfect family headlines, and that makes him dangerous to the defense. Because Albert isn't guessing or gossiping. He's relying on memory, and he's done staying quiet. Meanwhile, Rob's sons, Jake and Roy, are asking for peace. They want privacy, and Albert respects that. But he believes silence already costs too much. He refuses to let it win again. The brothers are grieving in a way only children can, trying to mourn their parents and their brother at the same time. It's a painful balance, trying to honor Rob and Michelle's memory without completely erasing Nick from their lives. And they're doing it with incredible grace. But Albert's not walking that same path, and he's been very clear about why. He isn't family by blood. He doesn't carry the same duty to forgive no matter what. He was Rob's friend, and what he's looking for now isn't closure. It's accountability. He believes grief doesn't have to mean silence, and forgiveness doesn't have to mean pretending nothing happened. While the siblings are choosing peace, Albert's choosing truth, even if it costs him connections, friends, and comfort. And that truth has already put him at odds with some powerful people. He's furious at how the industry reacted. The posts, the captions, the polished condolences flooding social media. Albert says many of those people hadn't spoken to Rob in years. Some ignored his calls, some quietly drifted away when things got messy. And others, the ones who knew Nick was unstable, still invited him out, still kept him close, because of the last name attached to him. Albert won't expose them by name, but everyone in those Hollywood circles already knows who he's talking about. He calls it performative grief. A public show of heartbreak without any private accountability. The kind of mourning that photographs well but means nothing behind the scenes. Albert's not interested in sympathy posts or hashtags. He wants the truth, the full truth. He wants to know who supplied Nick with those substances that night, who drove him to that house, who helped him move around when everyone knew he shouldn't have been there. He wants every silent helper, every fixer, every enabler brought to light. That's what this story is really about. Not gossip, not drama, but what happens when fame, money, and fear all mix with addiction and unchecked behavior. It's a raw, painful reminder of what happens when power replaces accountability. Albert says this entire case forces a question that no one wants to face. Where does love end and where does responsibility begin? Rob Reiner built his entire career telling stories where love always won. Movies that made people believe in redemption, connection, and hope. But now, Albert's standing here trying to protect that legacy, determined to make sure that the truth, not silence, is what finally wins this time. We grow up hearing that love conquers all, that real love can heal anything, survive anything. But Albert is standing in the wreckage saying something people don't want to admit. Love didn't stop this. Love made it possible. Love opened doors that should have been locked. Love gave access when boundaries were needed most. It's the brutal opposite of everything those classic Reiner films taught us, and that's why it hurts so deeply. Albert shared one story that broke everyone in the room. A quiet moment during funeral planning. He sat with Jake and Roy, sorting through photos for the memorial. There were pictures of Rob directing, Michelle laughing, snapshots of life that once felt unshakable. Then they came across a photo from about 15 years ago. The whole family together. Nick standing there, smiling, calm, looking like everything was fine. Albert said his first reaction was rage. He wanted that photo gone. To him, it felt like a lie printed on glossy paper. But the siblings stopped him. For them, that image wasn't about what came later. It was about the brother they once knew. The version of him that existed before everything fell apart. That difference in how they saw the same photo said everything. That's where the real fracture lies. Between those who need to remember the good and those who can't unsee what followed. Neither side is wrong. They're just carrying different weights. And then there's Albert himself. He's in his late 70s, and this kind of pain doesn't just fade. It sits in the body. The sleepless nights, the endless mental replays, the anger that won't quiet down, it's all taking a toll. Albert's hinted that he can feel time catching up with him, not because of danger, but because grief changes you. Losing Rob wasn't just losing a friend, it was losing part of himself, the one person who had been there through every era of his life. He shared an old memory from their early days on set, the chaos, the jokes, the unstoppable laughter. Rob, he said, was the only person who could make him laugh until he physically couldn't breathe. Now, that laughter is gone, and what's left is silence, the kind that echoes. He's tried watching their old films, tried revisiting the joy, but he can't. Every smile now drags up an image he can't unsee. Albert says the quiet is louder than any applause ever was, and that's why he's still speaking. Not for attention, not for revenge, but because silence already destroyed too much. He refuses to let it take more. He says something else was lost too. Rob's legacy. Think about it. How do you sit down and watch When Harry Met Sally now without that shadow crossing your mind? The joy's still there, but it's heavier now. The laughter comes with pain attached. The detail that shook everyone most wasn't about fame or money or even the trial. It was about Nick's eyes. Albert said that the last few times he saw him, something was missing. Not sadness, not anger, just emptiness. He described it like an abandoned building. Lights still on, walls still standing, but nothing alive inside. And what makes that image even more haunting is that Albert swears Rob saw it too. They were looking at the same thing, but they read it differently. Albert saw danger, a moment to pull back and protect. Rob saw pain, something to comfort. He thought love could fix it. That's where the tragedy lives. One man running toward the fire with hope, and the other yelling to stay back. And the man carrying the hope got burned. Now, with the January trial approaching, Albert's not staying in the background anymore. He's done playing the comedian, done softening the truth. He's stepping into a new role, the one who refuses to let this story get rewritten. Albert knows exactly how this system works. He knows how narratives get twisted in court, how defense teams spin tragedy into sympathy. He's watched too many juries get swayed by emotional backstories and misunderstood motives. And he knows expensive lawyers are experts at blurring lines until truth starts to look negotiable. That's why Albert's speaking now, to draw a line in the sand. His message couldn't be clearer. Rob and Michelle weren't villains. They weren't cold or careless. They were parents who loved fiercely. And in Albert's eyes, that love made them vulnerable. It's a painful truth most people don't want to face. We're taught to protect grief with silence. But Albert says silence already failed them once, and he won't let it happen again. He believes the only real respect left to give is honesty. Not polite rewrites, not comforting lies. He keeps returning to one chilling detail he can't let anyone erase. Rob was afraid that night, and that matters. Because fear tells the real story. Fear means awareness. Fear means danger was felt, not imagined. Albert says that moment needs to be remembered exactly as it was. Fear, confusion, panic. Because only by acknowledging that fear can there be accountability. This isn't revenge for him. This is grief sharpened into purpose. A demand that the truth doesn't get softened to make people comfortable. When the trial updates start flooding timelines and everyone's scrolling through headlines, Albert wants them to stop. He wants them to look past the legal talk, past the media spin, and imagine him sitting alone in his home, surrounded by 6 decades of memories, photographs, jokes, and laughter that will never come back. He's waiting for one call, not the one about progress or delays, the final one, the one that says accountability has finally arrived. And he knows even that won't bring peace. Because justice doesn't fill the silence. It doesn't bring back the laughter. This isn't a movie. There's no last-minute redemption, no perfect ending with the music swelling and everything made right again. There's just the slow, painful fade that real life brings. And Albert standing in that quiet, refusing to look away. He keeps saying the signs were there, that warnings were ignored, that comfort took priority over truth, and now he's daring everyone to face it. Because the hardest truth of all is this: the people closest to us aren't always safe. Sometimes the danger doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from inside the circle, from the people we do anything to protect. And sometimes the only person who truly sees it coming is the friend standing off to the side, screaming into the noise, powerless to stop the crash. The question now is, are we finally listening? If you made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below. And I'll see you on the next one.